So, is this the kind of book you'd like to read, little mouse?
Be more than human.
And welcome back to the channel. My name is J.R. Carroll. I am the author of the More Than Human novels, and today we are here to talk about one of the spiciest books I've ever read. And this book was not on my radar. I'm not huge into TikTok, which I later found out that that's kind of where it blew up at. But this book arrived at my house, and my wife, she's like, "Oh, my book's here," and I review books, So I was like, "Oh, well, let me check it out." And what book was it? Haunting Adeline. And I saw it, and I was like, "That's a cool cover. What, pray tell, what is it about?" And she's like, "Well, it's kind of a dark romance book. She's like, I hear it's pretty, it's pretty spicy." And so, you open up and you read the first page is like, "Don't read this if you have any trigger warnings at all," basically. And at first I wasn't gonna read it, but then I was like, why not? This isn't really my normal thing, but let's check it out. And I kind of did some research, and H.D. Carlton, who is the author, she is actually from Ohio, such as myself. So I'm like, okay, yet another reason to read it. And then I see that this thing has like 70,000 plus ratings on Amazon. So this book is like one of the biggest books of the last couple years. And I'm like, okay, I gotta know, why is it so good? And so the premise of this book is our main character, Adeline. She is a writer, and in her mid 20s, not unlike the author herself. She inherited a house from her grandmother, this big old, almost like a mansion type house. And her mom wants her to sell it, get rid of it. She says it's an old, rundown house with, bad memories. And then she kind of is like, "Well, your great grandmother was killed in this house." And thus starts one side of the story. And so you have her like not getting along with her mother, and she's like, "I'm gonna fix this house up. Basically, I'm gonna do what I want to do." And as she renovates, she ends up finding these uh, books, like letters, diaries that her grandmother wrote. And in there, apparently, her grandmother was being stalked, but then started to fall in love with her stalker. And as the story progresses, Adeline is at a book signing, and she sees this man in the corner that just looks off, and then he disappears. Well, then she starts having like these roses just appear in her house in different places all the time. And then it progresses to her seeing this guy outside her window, and then in her house. And then you also get the POV of the other character, which was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. This is the dynamic that was going on in this was pretty interesting. But his name is Zaid, and he is like the best hacker in the world. And without giving too many spoilers, he is a guy who is trying to stop human trafficking, and he's trying to infiltrate this group of individuals who are trafficking uh, women and children. And so you have this dynamic of, well, this guy does really great things, right? He's going after these guys, ruthless. He does ruthless things to them. And and as a guy reading this type of a book, right? This book is not. I'm not the demographic for this book, but when you're in his POV and he's doing those things, you're like, oh, that's pretty freaking cool, right? Like, yeah, that's the kind of book I would read. Um, but then you have that side, which is like, okay, he's a great guy, but then he's also stalking Adeline, and Adeline has her best friend who's also into like hacking and stuff, and so you get the story of they're trying to research and they're trying to research her grandmother, and throughout this book you'll go back and forth to 1944, and her grandmother will talk through the diary about what's going on in her life. So you have her trying to figure out who killed her grandmother. She's trying to figure out who this guy is, and then you also have the overarching thing about the human trafficking story that's going on, and they all kind of merge and converge uh, towards the end of the book. Now this is a duet, so the story's not complete at the end of this book. It does leave you on a cliffhanger. Uh, but as far as the spicy scenes, let me take a drink here because it was spicy. Whew. Now, I am no stranger to a sex scene in a book. Um, Hell, I wrote a couple of them, okay? But these are some of the kinkiest sex scenes you'll ever see in it. I mean, I can't imagine, especially a book this mainstream. I can't imagine it gets much kinkier than this. Some of these things you're just like, wow, there she went there. There she went there. And as again, I'm not the key demographic of this. I'm just like, okay, but also you get the other POV. You get his POV too. And being a guy, um, like reading their point of view and then also the audiobook listening is a whole different experience. I'm just like wow. Apparently there are a lot of people out here that this is their kink. But I would say the reason that this book was so popular isn't specifically for the smutty scenes in it or anything. I think there is that. There is definitely that. There's definitely a large group of mostly women that like this kind of stuff, like this kind of dominating stuff. But I think what made it from being just your normal dark romance to a immensely popular one is the story that's within it. Because I mean, if you took out all those scenes, you could still have a solid story on the inside. And H.D. Carlton writes magnificent suspense. So I'm wondering if in book two, if there's a little bit less sex scenes and more story from how it goes. Now I'm sure there is some of that in there because that's the base, right? Um, but if you aren't turned off by really really raunchy uh, sex scenes, but you would like to dive into a darker or really dark type of story, maybe check out Haunting Adeline. And remember, be more than human.